You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Dave.
I'm Warlord Scarr.
And I'm Owen.
And we're here today to discuss one of those little annoying things that, I care about and probably no one else does. But it's it's our podcast, but
Look, do we have a guild hierarchy here, Shane?
We do not. And yet, for some reason, so many adventures seem to have one that, has no fees and no oversight, but definitely they have, legal protection and, anti-competition laws to make sure that no random bag of peasants, bands together and stones the dragon to death. Oh, no. It is a adventurer's job to go into those dungeons and, scrape all the screws off the wall and cart off all the marble. But why is this so? Why would it be so that we have adventuring as a profession and a known profession that people seem to, even peasants on the street or on their farms, 3 to 5 lunatics with spells and magic items running around chopping up goblins. That's a normal thing. But at the same time, there's no special laws for adventurers. There's no licenses that adventurers need to get. They can just wander from hex to hex in 6-mile chunks and, slay evil and obtain treasure wherever they go. Isn't that a little bit incongruous?
A little bit, but I think there's ways to parse it. I think the first idea is that adventurers tend to thrive in very dangerous areas where law and even custom aren't very strong, like borderlands, wilderness, where right, so there's people who are actually wanting to go off and kill goblins. They're clearly adventurers, i.e., they're clearly madmen and women.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the idea of an awful lot of adventurers have dodgy backgrounds. They're not going to hang around where laws are looking at them too hard.
I would say that's fine, but in that situation, would one not expect these mysterious people with no coherent pasts gang up together and doing as they will in the wilderness? Would that not be seen as maybe weird? Would people maybe raise an eyebrow at why people would do this?
Sure, but I would say that an awful lot of people do raise eyebrows at adventures and, oh god, it's adventures. No, I think I get what you're saying, though. It heavily armed people wandering around tend to make locals nervous, like, just as a general rule. I think one of the cyberpunk source books mentioned an example of if somebody went around the street in full tactical gear with a diving mask on, they'd be thought of as pretty weird.
Any thoughts yourself, Owen?
Definitely it's something that's kind of sort of glossed over in initial D&D. It's kind of there are just these people who are pretty dangerous and seem to get really powerful very quickly, but don't worry about that. They're just like, you find mercenaries 10 a penny or sell swords or whatever else, but it's not clear exactly what they are. If you go looking at how manga and Japanese fiction handles it, they often have, it's a staple of isekais that basically someone gets transported to a fantasy world, often with some crazy overpowered ability, and the first thing they do is they join the Adventurers Guild because they're allowed to take jobs, and it's very much looked at as they see it through the lens of how it's often done in JRPGs, where there's an Adventurers Guild handing out jobs, and you join the Adventurers Guild and they'll give you a test to make sure you can do stuff, and then they give you a license, and you progress up the license by doing jobs. and you can do bigger and bigger jobs as it goes. And that's a staple, like to the point of being a trope in their stuff, that there's an adventurers guild.
Yeah,
And you hang out there, and you basically that is the job, and there's a girl there who'll give you jobs, and you're like, hey, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
It's a good introduction for people new to the adventuring life, whether player or character. Offers a bit of backup, maybe, like as in you're not completely on your own if things go a little bit pear-shaped. Yeah, there's definitely advantages to it.
Yeah, it's a situation that has a lot of advantages, and I think one of the big things is that it places the role of adventurers in the setting. It goes in and very explicitly defines, okay, the kingdom, or very, very entrenched business interests, or like, I mean, we could have an entire other episodes of how important guilds were. You could probably look it up on Brett Devereaux's blog about how medieval guilds were often simultaneously unions and monopolies, and all that stuff. And it's not a very weird thing to think of. All right, like maybe the first lot of adventurers, went in, got a lot of money, and then noticed everyone was looking at them funny, and then decided, no, we're just going to, drop a bag of diamonds in the back halls of the king's castle, and oh look, we have guild licenses to give out now.
Very, very doable.
And yeah, so you get this situation of the adventuring guild or knightly order or similar, like oath to the church or what have you, places the adventuring party as a part of society. It gives them legitimacy and a place to hang their hat, and they have a support structure. They have people to talk to. It helps them get to know all of the different NPCs. Can be very important for adventuring, and it really helps place the adventurers in the setting. And I do, however, note that this is one of those things that Western people have done these kinds of things before, because I say it's the idea of guilds as a fundamental source of adventure just sort of comes out of stuff like the Thieves' Worlds books, where Fafnir the Grey Mouser were always up against the Thieves Guild of Lankmar, who had basically monopolized all kinds of breaking and entering, heists, murders, etc. All very cool stuff for adventurers, but Fafnir the Grey Mouser were a cut above, and they were the independent rogues.
First appearance of the Skaven as well, aren't there? Or what would be the inspiration for the Skaven?
Probably, yeah. Because I do believe rat magic and various, like we call them a thieves guild, but they use an awful lot of back alley sorcery to get their stuff done. So they weren't quite like monoclassed as one might assume in a D&D setup. But here's the thing: it's like that's the assumption that stronger in Japanese media, because they like all their characters being legal entities. Less strong in Western media, where there's a lot more Wild West vibes.
Yeah,
going on. There's a very strong undercut of this is the frontier. Justice is done at the end of a blade, and even though technically you're in a city or a town in most classic RPG setups, it's almost invariably declared as a city of thieves, a Mos Eisley style place where there's no real law and order except how much you can bribe the guards.
The thing is, criminals create an order of their own, though. Like, because eventually they realize, if nothing else, well, it could be more profitable if things were organized.
Yeah, that is I guess one of the missing things we're going here. But yeah, what I was trying to get at with the Wild West analogy is I think Western RPG traditions are still very hung up on this idea of the stranger with no name wanders into town and solves all everyone's problems idea. And while, your good Wild West media will very much focus on the how many people in town do not want these problems solved and definitely do not want them solved by an outsider, that nuance can kind of get lost as we sort of, people focus on, this is how many notches I have in my hat. This is how many knives I have. This is how many times I can spin my gun and, shoot pigeons out of the air or whatever. And not so much in the, you're a dangerous outsider coming to our town to cause problems. Please leave element.
It does happen, though. There's times where the locals are not happy to see adventures.
Yeah, that's the thing is, like, that's absolutely fine. Neither of these approaches are bad or wrong. Like, as long as you're willing to accept the consequences of what one of them, which each of them has. And I think that's where my issue with this dichotomy is coming from, is that you have the orderly, gilded, or licensed, or oath to the paladins adventure party setup, where the adventure party has a place in society, has a legal basis, but then also has legal responsibilities and has people to answer to and people they have to keep good relations with, and they have to deal with maybe people who do not want to have do this stuff, or maybe the guild exists and they don't want to be part of it, and that means that they are independent, and that can have advantages, but it means you're dealing with a lot more shady people. You have to watch out for the law and the guild coming to get their dues with, all those +5 swords they've been building up. That's one approach. And then you have the frontier swordsman approach where you're a free agent. You can pick over the ruins of the great empire as you will. The only people who can stop you is people who, point swords and crossbows at you and make you stop. But you're a filthy outsider that we are barely tolerating because you spend, gold pieces here as if they were coppers, and none of us are. The entire town could, gang up and probably wear you down eventually because this is a system of hit points and 20s always hit. But half the town would be dead, so you have to keep proving that you being alive means that half the town isn't eaten by dragons or whatever. That's also a valid way of doing it. The problem is I think a lot of parties just kind of fall into a very hazy middle where everyone knows what an adventure is and begrudgingly respects that they are allowed to do that, and grumbles but never threatens violence in return. But there's no fees to a guild, there's no bribes to send to the king to let you keep doing this. There's just this weird disconnected idea that what the player characters are doing is okay by default, don't worry about it, and they just sort of bumble through hex crawling and dungeon delving as they will, and don't worry about the finer details. And that's one of those things that doesn't hold up to scrutiny, because you're basically stealing the best parts of both of our scenarios. You're stealing all the people know who you are, people understand what you're doing. No one's going to say that the very act of adventuring is offensive, but also you're a free agent who can do whatever you want, and no tax on your 3,000 gold pieces or whatever.
Yeah, I think it gets very interesting in settings where there are actually taxes or duties associated with say bringing bags of gold back into civilization. And like I recall one adventure where that I leafed through where they point out that the local main city, it's the only city for like a huge distance. It's the place you're going to be able. It's the only place you're going to be able to offload the loot in this like MIDI setting. If you go into the front door, you're going to be taxed. I forget what it is. I think it was like 15-20%. It was a significant chunk of the loot. And players coming, even players used to that, don't generally want to pay up. So they're going to so there's like the adventure even suggests ideas about how players might try to get around this. Sneaking into the city using smuggling, and you could build an entire like campaign around getting the loot in and fencing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and many older games did, have the sort of little mini game of get past the guards,
Bribe the guards,
bribing the guards, like bribe the guards enough that they don't check your wagon, but not too much that they're not so little that they think, well, we're going to get half of that 20% anyway. It's you can absolutely have a deep gameplay about this, but there's the element of you're taking but a single copper piece from you, death to your entire civilization of player escalation, because
absolutely
the ability to escalate is part of the fun for a lot of people. But there's I suspect a large number of people who do not want to pull out the calculators and figure out what 20% is.
There's that too.
Particularly when you have to value all your gems and candlesticks and whatever else you stole from the dungeon.
Have you ever read any fiction that features adventurers as not the main characters? That someone else sees them and goes, "What's up with those crazy people?"
Oh, I do. I can't remember the context, but I do remember describing them. They were so heavily armed.
Yeah, that's there's if you've ever read Perdido Street Station by China Miéville, there's a section he's a big RPG head. He wrote some stuff for Dragon magazine about here's classes that you might use. He's a bestiary. He wrote a bunch of stuff, and there was talk of doing a Baslag RPG because in the first book, Perdido Street Station, it's weird fiction. It's not quite. It's kind of urban fantasy in a really strange world.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of a mix between sword and sorcery and steampunk and
exactly
Cthulhu mixed in. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so one of the point there's this horrible threat is tearing apart the city, and to rescue his girlfriend, one of the characters is like, I gotta go hire some muscle, and there's only one group that'll work with us. And they go down effectively into this section of the city where the adventurers hang out. And they're like, what are these people? They're all crazy. They break into tombs. They roam the wilderness. They're just interested in gold and the experience. That's it. And they hire these three kind of heavily armed nutters who are like, yeah, sure, sounds good. And they're like, this is almost certain death. They're like, yeah, that's life, and they show up and they're they're very competent, very dangerous. They still get killed like dogs in the situation they're in, but it's just an example of this is what these look like to other people. They look like crazy people. They look like, weird kind of cultists that believe in something incredibly strange, who don't have normal values, who are, very questionable. What you like, what's wrong with these guys? This is ludicrous. This is insane. And that's their thing. And I always thought that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
To do it like that,
Sorry, Shane.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, that is kind of cool. And as a seat the book, I do think it's very interesting to explore. But I think the problem for a lot of groups is that they're not expecting to be looked at in that way when they start their fun D&D roll dice and the goblins fall over adventure. And so there's sort of a pullback from that, and like wait, why are these people I thought you said D&D wasn't weird. Why are all the people in the D&D world treating us like we're weird? It's kind of response, and then on the other side, there's the realistic of interacting with society, where you have to pay taxes, and one coin out of every 10 gold coins must go to the bishop, and there are 3 coins out of every 10 silver must go to the taxman, and all candlesticks are the property of the Candlestick Guild, and you better bribe at least 3 of the guards. You get out without bribing Bimbly Jim, but he's new. But by a few months you'll have to pay him more than everyone else. These are complications that people don't want in their, and this is sort of getting back to some of the reasons why people have sort of dropped the gold for XP requirement in games. This is more logistics, and people are very predictable about what level of logistics they want in their gaming. Because like if these in the real world, or settings of verisimilitude, people care very much about their taxes and how much they get for their labor and such. That could be incredibly thing to argue about, like how much does it get the king, and should we just burn down the city and run off to the next one where they don't have taxes because we can just point swords at their barn or whatever. These are questions that a lot of GMs and a lot of parties do not want to answer. They want to go from adventure to adventure, accumulating loot, and can please just not worry about how a bank works in a world where any minor mage with an earth elemental can just smash open any bank and steal all your stuff.
Yeah, I think that style of adventuring is fine, but it leaves out the possibilities where characters could have a real an impact on the game world and shape it. And part of that, I think, involves interacting with it in ways that aren't necessarily fun, but are necessary to make it make sense. Like, if not taxes, then any sort of obligation to the wider society, or to a guild, or to the throne, or the Republic, or what have you.
I mean, yeah, you can easily you can use a guild with a very weird setup to simulate this. You could just say, just have the guild say, okay, we'll store all your gold and invest it and use the interest to pay all the taxes and guild fees off it, or something ludicrous like that. Very often, the players do not actually care about the gold; they care about the XP they get for bringing back the gold. So you can hand wave various financial instruments. It might mean you're moving slightly further away from the vague Dark Ages medieval towards something more like Mediterranean, Renaissance style guild, urban fantasy where there's more civilization, there's more set up for these kinds of things. That can be fine. The fantasy kitchen sink's there for a reason.
One of the things I like in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you can't kill dragons with archers. Like, you could set up 1,000 level 1 archers, and they will not be able to kill a high level dragon. They will not be able to hurt it.
Because of the AC rules?
Yeah, because the 4 degrees of success, they're going to be like, okay, I rolled the nat 20. That's a critical success. So my degree of success is 1 more, but I rolled more than 10 under the monster's AC. So that's a critical miss. Critical miss makes it 1 step worse. Critical success makes it 1 step better. So I end up with a miss. So I miss him. And it means that if you want to fight or deal with high level monsters, you need high level characters. and you go, there's no other way to deal with these things. I need a super powered tac op squad who are willing to run around with millions of gold or credits worth of equipment strapped to themselves,
and
risking
not
their
just retire
lives
to a villa. Like,
Yeah. Not just go, I have more money than I will ever need, I'm retiring. It's no, I'm in this for the love of the game.
Yeah.
like those aren't entirely sane people. Like,
No, they're very much not. They're not. They are the kind of the outlanders. Like, you could look at somebody like, for a non-fantasy regular fiction person, Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher is an adventurer. He doesn't want a regular life. He does not want to settle down. He doesn't want a house. He's not on the run from anything. He's just wandering. Rolls into town, solves some problems, leaves. Sees someone being kidnapped, beats up the kidnapper, leaves. You know? He's like a heroic cryptid. Shows up, fixes a problem, leaves.
Mad Max, perfect
Yeah.
example.
You know, so it's someone who is not, like, I think that has to be focused in. They're not part of society. That's one of the things. They're not connected with where they are. They're a transplant that comes in from the outside who often wreaks havoc as a result, doesn't care. And this is often the danger of adventurers, is that they can't be part of society, so they're not constrained by society's rules. So someone saying, you can't beat up the president, he's the president, is not a good enough restriction. And then how do you stop someone who's effectively a tactical nuke with a sword?
Are we getting the NRA argument now?
No, you often means, like, what do you, like, because I've had that problem. What do you do when an adventurer decides to go rogue, gets annoyed at the political conspiracy, and decides to start hacking necks?
I mean, there's been real people who've gotten frustrated with things and resort to swords and guns.
Yeah.
But like, I'm just thinking that all the taxes that the king's getting from, or the Senate are getting from somewhere else, they've been able to equip their own squads of less crazy people,
or more dedicated, is better way of looking at it. That they,
well, yeah, actually, fair.
People say that they prefer their wizards to be the mysterious towers off in the wilderness, but I'm sure there are ways to pay a wizard enough that he builds a tower, next to the president's office, and researches mostly defense and anti-terrorist spells.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're basically coming down to elements of, like, any particular one of these approaches, whether emphasizing that the players are part of society, they have to have some kind of legal backing, they probably have obligations that they need to give to, but that gives them protection in kind and useful services and such. Or that they are wild rogues off in the reaches of society that may be necessary in this very, very dangerous world of your campaign setting, sci-fi, fantasy, cyberpunk, whatever. They may be necessary, but they will never be part of society, and they will always have people trying to lead them at arm's length or try to encourage them to move along. Either one of these is useful, but you're going to have to make some choices about that. And well, you're not going to have to. I think the point is that a lot of people feel they do not have to, and just sort of exist in a very nebulous setup of, don't worry too much about it. We'll just assume that we're in the right, and it'll all work out. But yeah, it's like, it's a psychology thing. I think at the end of the day, I think people do not want to feel obligated to be treated in a specific way to get their dungeon experience. They just want to just sort of dungeon or quest or saving people from kidnappers. They just sort of want to have a easy and They don't. These are not the problems of taxation or social ostracization are not the things they want to deal with when they come into the game, and therefore, as a result, it gets ignored or brushed over, and a little bit of the realism of the setting is sacrificed as a result, and you may be okay with that. That's absolutely fine, but I would say that it is worth thinking about it as you're setting up your game, or as you're going through the game and what role the players are in change. Maybe very, very likely you could say that they start off as, a couple of farm hands find some daggers in a spell book, an old hole in the ground, and decide, oh, we're going to be adventurers now. And they, they role play through until they burn down their own town and have to leave, and they come to the guild and say, "Oh, adventurers, are you? Are you properly licensed? Would you like to come to our guild, or maybe that other guild over there? You don't like those guys? They have very high fees. We only ask you, fight dragons slightly more often. It's fine. We're the best guild." These are just things I think that if a group or campaign were to think of it, preferably earlier on, but as I say, some things happen in the middle of a campaign to change the situations. I do think you're going to add an awful lot to your game if you think about this ahead of time and just put together like where your players, these adventurers that they are playing, fit in the world, and like what place they have or lack of place, and use that to enrich your game. Any other final thoughts?
They're weirdos. Sometimes you gotta play them as weirdos, but it's nice to have a thing of you can join this guild, and they'll hold your hand and give you an idea of where to go first and what to do first.
Even weirdos can like company sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like we all getting together to play these games around a table. We should possibly maybe, if that's what we're doing out of character, maybe model that a little bit in character. A whole guild full of weirdos, there are worse places to hang your hat. And if you are in the market for a guild full of total weirdos to hang around with and chat, you can join us on our social media, find our Discord and the link in the show notes, or otherwise track us down and tell us about your deep thoughts about the place of RPG players in society. But for now, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. Join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.